All right, so here's our third part in the genomics lecture. Again, primarily focusing on what's going on with the Human Genome Project and what we're doing with that information, what we've discovered, but probably most importantly, where do we want it to go? What is the potential future with that type of information? So last lecture we were talking about DNA relatedness or genetic genomic relatedness between humans and other species. So make sure you guys can fill in these percentages. What is our relatedness to yeast versus roundworms versus fruit flies versus mice? And keep in mind or try to correlate it with, as we move through the levels of classification, the relatedness increases. So we're only in the same domain as fungi, not really closely related, just one level of relatedness domain, eukaryotic cells. But when we move into the animal kingdoms, kingdom Animalia, and we start moving through the different phylums, through the classes, through the orders, we see the degree of relatedness increasing dramatically. So we talked about the mice in the last one. Now, we're very, very closely related to these mice. We use mice as model organisms in genetic research a lot of times because of the similarity in our genetics. But that's not our closest genetic relative. When we move into the primates, we get even closer. So the gorilla over here shares 98.9% of our genetic relatedness. That is phenomenal. I mean, that is huge. We have the same bone structure. Granted, theirs are bigger, longer, thicker, but the same basic anatomical structure. The development of the human body, how the bones grow, the position of the bones, the organization, it's all controlled by master genes. And these master genes are found across all animals. There are certain genes we see in every single animal. They're basic control genes or developmental genes. They span every animal in the animal kingdom, which is why we see this relatedness. But our closest genetic relative, now these are not ancestors, they're relatives, what we would call cousins. Our closest genetic cousin is this chimpanzee on the right, specifically bonobos, as a specific type of chimpanzee. We share over 99% of our similarities with them. Again, we look at them and think, oh, we're nowhere close to, that doesn't look like us. But think about basic anatomy. They have a four-chambered heart just like us. They have blood vessels just like us, lungs, livers, kidneys. Their brain structure is very similar to ours. Yes, it's smaller, but that doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. Urinary system, reproductive system, all those systems, they're basically the same. Yeah, they have a lot more hair than us. All right. So what? That doesn't make them that different. So less than 1% difference. And it's amazing when we look at chimpanzees and bonobos in particular, they share so many behavioral characteristics with us, social characteristics. It's incredible. They have a social structure very similar to humans. They can think, they can rationalize, they can problem solve, they can plan for the future, they can recognize themselves. They do nearly everything that we do. They can create language, they can create and build things. They're just amazing animals. And evolutionarily, we look at them and say, we're just less than 1 degree apart. So we would expect a common ancestor to both of us so many millions of years ago. We will be getting into that when we get into evolution, the relatedness between chimps and humans. Please remember this. They are not our ancestor. They are a cousin of ours that is existing right now. Chimps have evolved just like humans have evolved, but we do share common ancestry. It's about 6 to 10 million years ago. There was a common ancestor that gave rise to both chimps and humans. Ancestral group, I should say, not one single individual. Okay, so we have a lot of knowledge right now from the Genome Project. And what are we going to do with it? So here's a cartoon. Now, we look at it and think, okay, this isn't even reality. Can you tell that that baby is going to be a smoker, homosexual, insurance agent, etc.? based upon its DNA. Today, no, we're not completely there. But what I want you guys to do, print off this cartoon, white out, erase, or cover up this little balloon. Take this and show it to your grandparents and ask them, when they were pregnant with your parent, your mom, your dad, whoever you can talk to about this, ask somebody who was pregnant back in the 50s or 40s, would they have thought that cartoon was realistic, that there's a machine that can tell you gender of the baby? They would have laughed back in 1940 at a cartoon like that, saying, you're going to tell me the sex of my child when it's inside of me? No way, that's not possible. Yet look where we're at. Rosalind Franklin was using X-rays to find DNA structure in 1952. So X-rays and ultrasounds and things like that were not common back then, but today it's routine. So the point of this is, while today we look at the cartoon and think, not happening, where are we going to be in 10 years? Where are we going to be in 5 years? Or 15 or 20? Think about those possibilities. That's what I want you to do, is think about how this can move forward and what we can do with this in the future. Okay, so different genetic disorders have been studied or are currently being studied and looking for genetic links. So schizophrenia, individuals who have it, there are markers. That's what these little orange circles represent. There's different gene markers on specific chromosomes that seem to be a pattern among people who have schizophrenia. So this is going to take more work and more research and more support, but what scientists are trying to figure out, what if these pieces of DNA all trigger expression of schizophrenia? If we can go in and change just one of these pieces, will that disrupt schizophrenia and prevent schizophrenia from being expressed? Huge possibilities. I mean, that's what the hope is. Now, the concern is maybe this blocking this will cause something else to be expressed. That might be bad. That's what we have to be careful of. Okay? For those of you heading towards pharmacy, I want you guys to, excuse me, I want you guys to look into this. Think about the field of pharmacogenomics. It is a growing possibility. Not there, but growing. Can we design medicines based upon the genetics of the individual? So when you use a painkiller because you have a headache, you pick a brand. Is that brand the one that works best for you? How many different brands did you have to go through until you found, wow, Excedrin works for me, or Advil, or etc.? How many times does the doctor change your meds because they're just not working right? They're not working right because it doesn't fit your genetics. So pharmacogenomics is a field that is developing to explore that possibility. So the concerns with a lot of this are, who's going to get your genetic information and what can be done with it? Fortunately, back in 2008, and then officially, finally in 2009, federal law was passed to prevent discrimination based upon genetic information of the individual or the individual's family member. So the big picture here, you cannot be discriminated against because of your DNA, because of your genetic code, because you have a gene that says you might get cancer, you might have this, you might have that. Legally, you cannot be discriminated against, just like you cannot be legally discriminated against based upon gender, race, color, all these different things. These are protected under discrimination acts. So it's called GINA, Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, prohibits discrimination based upon genetic information. Okay, so if you ever were or feel you were, there is legal protection for you. So it's great that that was established. Problem is, most people don't have a clue that it's even out there, that that is available. But what I want you to do, I want you guys to think about the potential here. Put together a list of pros, and don't just copy mine. Don't just, oh, this is what he said is a pro versus a con. I want you to think independently here. What do you see as a positive from the Genome Project? And maybe you only come up with one. Maybe you come up with 100. But you guys need to think about this and come up with your pros. Balance it out by considering the negatives. What are the possible negatives? Weigh it out and then make an educated decision to say, do we move forward with this? Do I personally, as a biologist, become involved in this? If I see so many positives and so few negatives, maybe I want to pursue this as a career and go into genetic engineering and biotechnology. Washington University in St. Louis has a phenomenal program in the Genome Project. So if you guys are interested in human genome, WashU, right down the road from us. So I would encourage you, check it out. Transfer over there as a bio major, get into the program, pursue an advanced degree, become involved in it. If you don't feel there's benefits, then you need to be able to articulate that and explain, hey, we really need to shut this down or put restrictions on it, etc. Here is why, and support your objection with factual data. Sadly, in life today, we take too many piece of information from a soundbite. You hear this little 20-second news clip, or I saw it on Facebook, or I saw this, and that's how we're making decisions. We're not making them based on rational, logical information. We're making them often on just what appeals to us. Instead of evaluating the situation, we say, oh, I heard it, so it must be true because I trust it, I believe it. So balance it out, guys. Look at both sides, make a decision, but be able to support your side. That's the key with any of this. Okay? So the last thing to leave you with, here's a movie that came out back in the early 90s called Gattaca. Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman. Very young Ethan Hawke and young Uma Thurman. But I want you to take a look at the cover here. Gattaca. Those are the DNA letters. Guanine, adenine, thymine, cytosine. If you have the opportunity, watch the movie. It's an easy movie to watch. It doesn't stress you out. It's not one of those deep thinking movies. But watch it and look at it with a different lens. That now that I got a little bit of background on the Genome Project, what are they telling us in this movie? So it's about society in the future and how society has changed based upon genetics. And you can create your child, your perfect child, with your genetics. Pull your piece of DNA from you, DNA from the other parent, splice it together. Here's the child. You wanted a boy with blue eyes that'll be 6'2" tall. We took all those little snippets of information from your genome, put it together. There's your child. And what does that do for society? What does that tell us? How does it help us? Does it hurt us? Etc. So as you watch the movie, and I really hope you guys have the opportunity to watch it. Probably get it on Netflix. Might even be able to just YouTube it, and somebody may have a pirate version out there. But watch the movie. Get a pizza, get something to, whatever you want to drink, and just enjoy it. But look at all the DNA behind it and all the biotechnology and the biology. And this is something that was produced, this movie was produced 20 plus years ago. Are we getting closer to Gattaca today? In today's society with what we can do with the Genome Project. So the final thought to leave us with, our DNA can help us. It can make us a great athlete. It can make us incredibly smart. It can make us really, really super good at things. And it can hinder us. Maybe you have addiction issues. Maybe you have bad genetics and you're not going to be a good athlete. You're going to be slow. You're going to have diabetes. You're going to have these things. But we never ever should be using it as an excuse to say, well, I have the gene for diabetes, so I'm just not going to worry about my weight and my health and how I eat and exercise. Or I have the gene for addiction, so I'm going to drink a lot, or I'm going to be a drug user, or I'm going to be a gambler. You don't use it as an excuse. If you know you have these genetic pieces of information, you need to accommodate and adjust for that. As an individual, you personally need to take responsibility and say, all right, if I have a gene for addiction, I probably want to try to avoid putting myself in an environment that would cause that gene to be expressed. Or if I recognize the expression, I need to be able to block it, stop it, manage it. So explore your genetics, explore your genome. It's a great, great thing to look at, and hopefully you guys get more information about it as you move on in future courses.